Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag as he walked out of the auto repair shop. The sun was setting over Detroit, and another long day was finally ending. His back ached from working under cars all day, and his wallet felt lighter than ever. The bills kept piling up, and the work kept getting scarce. He pulled out his phone to check for messages. One new email caught his attention. The sender was someone called Legal Associates of Nevada. Jake almost deleted it, thinking it was spam, but something made him tap on it instead. The message was short and strange. It said that his great-uncle Walter Morrison had passed away and left him something important. Jake scratched his head, trying to remember any uncle named Walter. He could not recall ever meeting this relative or even hearing his parents talk about him. The email contained coordinates in the Nevada desert and a security code. It also mentioned that Jake needed to come alone and bring identification. The whole thing seemed like a scam, but the email looked official enough to make him curious. 3 days later, Jake found himself driving a rented car through the empty Nevada desert. The GPS led him far from any main roads to a spot that looked like nothing but sand and rocks. He checked the coordinates twice to make sure he was in the right place. There was nothing there except a small metal panel sticking out of the ground. Jake got out of the car and walked over to examine it. The panel had a keypad and a scanner. He entered the security code from the email and placed his hand on the scanner. The ground began to rumble and shake. A large section of desert floor started to slide away, revealing a hidden entrance with stairs leading down into darkness. Jake stared in amazement as lights automatically turned on to illuminate the underground passage. His heart pounded as he descended the stairs. The passage was long and went deeper than he expected. Finally, he reached a massive metal door that opened. As he approached, beyond the door was something that took his breath away. The underground facility was enormous, with corridors stretching in every direction. Advanced technology filled every room with displays and controls that looked decades ahead of anything Jake had ever seen. The walls were made of some kind of smooth white material that seemed to glow with its own light. Jake wandered through the facility in wonder. He found rooms full of strange devices and computers with symbols he did not recognize. Other rooms contained what looked like weapons and equipment that belonged in a science fiction movie. In the center of the facility, he discovered a large circular chamber with a raised platform in the middle. 2 figures stood motionless. On the platform, like statues, one was a woman with long silver hair and pointed ears wearing elegant armor. The other was a massive dragon with emerald and blue scales that seemed to shift colors in the light. Jake approached slowly, thinking they might be very realistic sculptures, but as he got closer, the woman suddenly opened her eyes. They were violet and seemed to look right through him. The dragon also lifted its great head and fixed Jake with an ancient, intelligent gaze. The woman stepped forward and spoke in a voice that sounded like music. Her words came directly into his mind rather than through his ears. She said her name was Lyra Nightwhisper, and the dragon was called Stormclaw. They had been waiting for him for many years. Jake tried to speak, but no words came out. Lyra smiled gently and explained that his great-uncle Walter had been part of a secret group that protected Earth from threats beyond the stars. Walter had no children of his own, so the responsibility now fell to Jake. She told him that an ancient enemy was coming to destroy all life on Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy. This enemy was called the Void Swarm, and they consumed worlds like a plague of cosmic locusts. The only way to stop them was with technology and knowledge that had been hidden away for decades. Stormclaw moved closer, and Jake could feel the power radiating from the magnificent creature. The dragon was not just an animal, but an intelligent being older than human civilization. Both Lyra and Stormclaw had fought this enemy before in battles across distant stars. Lyra explained that Jake carried special blood that allowed him to operate the ancient weapons and ships stored in the facility. His great-uncle had discovered this genetic trait and prepared everything for the day when Jake would be needed. The inheritance was not just money, but the tools to save humanity. Jake felt overwhelmed by everything he was hearing. Part of him wanted to run back to his simple life, fixing cars, in Detroit. But another part recognized the truth in Lyra's words. He could feel something awakening inside him, like a door opening in his mind. The facility contained a small fortune in gold and precious metals. But that was nothing compared to the real treasure. Advanced starships waited in hidden hangars beneath the desert. Weapons that could destroy mountains were stored in secure vaults. Knowledge of technologies that could transform human civilization filled massive computer databases. Lyra showed him displays that revealed the approaching danger. Dark shapes moving between the stars, consuming everything in their path. The Void Swarm had already destroyed several solar systems, and Earth was directly in their path. They would arrive. Within months, not years, Jake realized his ordinary life was over forever. He could not ignore this responsibility even if he wanted to. The fate of everyone he cared about depended on his willingness to accept this incredible inheritance and learn to use powers he never knew he possessed. Stormclaw lowered his great head and touched Jake gently with his snout. In that moment, Jake felt a connection form between them. The dragon shared images of distant battles and the courage needed to face impossible odds. Together with Lyra, they would stand against the darkness approaching Earth. The underground facility would become Jake's new home and training ground. He had inherited more than just wealth. He had inherited a war that would determine whether humanity survived or joined the countless dead civilizations scattered across the galaxy. The next morning, Jake woke up in quarters that felt more like a luxury hotel than an underground bunker. The bed was incredibly comfortable, and the room had everything he needed, including clothes that fit him perfectly. Lyra had explained that the facility could manufacture almost anything given enough time. Jake found Lyra and Stormclaw in the training chamber, a vast room with walls that could display any environment. The dragon was resting while Lyra practiced with weapons that glowed with their own inner light. She moved with grace and speed that seemed impossible. When Lyra saw Jake, she smiled and gestured for him to join her. She handed him a device that looked like a combination of sword and energy weapon. The moment his fingers touched it, the weapon came alive with blue light. Jake nearly dropped it in surprise. Lyra explained that the weapon was responding to his genetic code. Every piece of technology in the facility was designed to work with people who carried the special bloodline Jake possessed. She began teaching him basic techniques for controlling the energy flow. At first, Jake could barely make the weapon light up without it flickering and dying. But as the hours passed, he started to understand how his thoughts and intentions affected the device. The weapon became brighter and more stable as his confidence grew. Stormclaw joined the training sessions by sharing mental images with Jake. The dragon could project memories directly into his mind, showing him battles from long ago. Jake saw civilizations that had faced the Void Swarm and learned from their victories and defeats. The most difficult part was learning to pilot the ancient starships. Jake sat in the cockpit of a sleek fighter craft while Lyra guided him through the basic controls. The ship responded to his thoughts as much as his physical movements. It took days before he could even get the engines to start properly. Meanwhile, Jake called his childhood friend Maya Chen and asked her to come to Nevada. He could not explain everything over the phone, but he convinced her that he needed her scientific expertise. Maya was a brilliant researcher who specialized in studying alien life forms. When Maya arrived at the facility, she spent the first hour convinced that everything was an elaborate joke or movie set. But when Stormclaw demonstrated his ability to phase through solid walls and breathe energy instead of fire, she finally accepted the impossible truth. Maya proved invaluable in understanding how the alien technology worked. She could analyze the scientific principles behind devices that seemed like magic. Her logical mind helped Jake approach the training from a different angle, making faster progress. The facility computer systems contained vast databases of information about the Void Swarm and the civilizations that had fought them. Maya spent hours studying the records and learning about enemy tactics and weaknesses. She discovered that the Swarm was not just one species but a collective of consumed races. As Jake's training progressed, he began experiencing strange dreams and visions. Stormclaw was sharing memories not just during training, but while Jake slept. He saw worlds that existed before. Earth was formed and battles that raged across entire galaxies. The most disturbing visions showed what happened to planets that fell to the Void Swarm. The enemy did not just destroy life but consumed it completely, leaving behind empty husks of worlds with no trace that life had ever existed. The consumed life energy made the swarm stronger and harder to defeat. Lyra taught Jake to use meditation techniques that helped him process the overwhelming information. Without proper mental preparation, the visions could drive a person insane. She had seen it happen to other potential pilots who could not handle the dragon bond. During one training session, Jake successfully flew a starship through a complex obstacle course while linked mentally with Stormclaw. The dragon could see threats that Jake missed, while Jake could pilot the ship with precision that Stormclaw lacked alone. Together, they were far more effective than either could be individually. Maya discovered that Earth electronic systems were already showing signs of void swarm interference. Satellites were experiencing unexplained malfunctions, and deep space monitoring equipment was picking up strange energy signatures. The enemy advanced scouts were already in the outer solar system. The training became more intense as the threat grew closer. Jake learned to fight with energy weapons while piloting starships at the same time. Lyra pushed him harder each day, knowing that their time was running short. The void swarm moved faster than anyone had predicted. Stormclaw began teaching Jake about dragon combat techniques in space. The great creature could survive in vacuum and fly between planets, using abilities that defied human understanding. Dragons were living weapons designed by an ancient civilization to fight cosmic threats. Jake's genetic heritage became more apparent as his training advanced. His reflexes improved beyond human normal, and his ability to interface with alien technology grew stronger. Maya theorized that his bloodline contained genetic modifications made thousands of years ago. The facility defense systems activated automatically as Jake Powers awakened ancient sensors, detected his growing abilities, and began preparing weapons that had been dormant for decades. The entire complex was coming alive as if it had been waiting for his arrival. During a particularly intense training session, Jake accidentally activated a powerful energy cannon while practicing with Stormclaw. The blast carved a tunnel through solid rock, demonstrating the incredible destructive power at their disposal. Lyra seemed pleased rather than concerned by the accident. Maya analysis revealed that the void swarm was not just randomly destructive, but followed specific patterns. They consumed civilizations in a particular order that suggested intelligence and planning. The enemy was far more dangerous than a simple plague of space locusts. Jake began to understand that his ordinary life was truly over. He was becoming something new, neither fully human nor alien, but a bridge between worlds. His connection with Stormclaw grew stronger each day, and he could feel the dragon presence even when they were apart. The facility contained enough firepower to defend Earth, but only if Jake could master the technology in time. Lyra estimated that they had weeks rather than months before the main swarm force arrived. The training would continue day and night until Jake was ready to face an enemy that had destroyed countless worlds. As Jake fell asleep each night, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. Billions of lives depended on his ability to learn powers he never knew existed. The inheritance from his great-uncle was becoming both a blessing and a burden that would define the rest of his life. The alarms in the facility began screaming at 3 a.m, waking Jake from a deep sleep filled with dragon dreams. He rushed to the command center where Lyra and Maya were already studying the displays with grim expressions on their faces. The screens showed dark shapes moving past Jupiter, massive forms that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The Void Swarm advanced scouts had arrived weeks ahead of schedule, and they were heading directly toward Earth at incredible speed. Stormclaw entered the command center with his scales glowing bright red, which Lyra explained meant the dragon was preparing for battle. The great creature could sense the approaching danger, even better than their most sensitive instruments. Jake felt his heart racing as he watched the enemy ships move through space. They looked like living things rather than constructed vessels, pulsing and shifting as they traveled. The largest of them was bigger than the moon and growing larger as it consumed asteroids and space debris. Maya worked frantically at the computer terminals trying to get more information about the enemy force. Her analysis showed that there were dozens of smaller scouts surrounding 3 massive hive ships. The Void Swarm was sending a serious force against Earth. Lyra activated the facility emergency protocols and began powering up weapon systems that had been dormant for decades. The underground complex transformed as hidden panels opened to reveal massive energy cannons and launch bays for the ancient starships. A new alarm began sounding, and Maya announced that someone was trying to contact them through Earth military channels. Jake watched as a stern-faced woman in a military uniform appeared on the main display. The woman introduced herself as Colonel Lisa Rodriguez from a classified government defense unit. She had been monitoring unusual activity in space and demanding to know if Jake facility was responsible for launching unauthorized spacecraft. Jake looked at Lyra, who nodded encouragingly. He activated the communication system and tried to explain the situation to Colonel Rodriguez. She listened with growing disbelief as he described the approaching void swarm and the alien technology hidden beneath the desert. Colonel Rodriguez initially thought Jake was insane, until Maya transmitted the sensor data showing the approaching enemy ships. The military satellites could detect the same massive objects that facility instruments were tracking. Within hours, Colonel Rodriguez arrived at the facility with a small team of specialists. She spent the first few minutes staring at Stormclaw and Lyra in shock before her military training took over. She began asking practical questions about Earth defenses and enemy capabilities. Lyra showed the military team recordings of previous battles against the Void Swarm. The footage was horrifying, showing entire fleets of defenders being consumed and converted into more enemy units. The swarm grew stronger, with every victory making them nearly impossible to defeat. Jake demonstrated his ability to pilot the ancient starships while mentally linked with Stormclaw. Colonel Rodriguez watched in amazement as the fighter craft performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. The Dragon Bond allowed for reaction times faster than any human pilot could achieve. The first battle began when Void Swarm scouts entered the outer atmosphere of Earth. Jake flew his fighter with Lyra as co-pilot while Stormclaw soared alongside them through space. The Dragon could survive in vacuum and fly faster than any spacecraft. The enemy scouts were unlike anything in human military experience. They moved like living creatures and seemed to anticipate attacks before they were made. When Jake fired energy weapons at them, they absorbed some of the blasts and reflected others. Stormclaw proved to be incredibly effective in space combat. The Dragon could phase partially out of normal reality, making enemy attacks pass through him harmlessly. Then he would phase back and strike with claws that could tear through the strongest materials. During the battle, Jake discovered that the ancient weapons were far more powerful than anything Earth military possessed. A single shot from his fighter craft could destroy enemy scouts that would take dozens of human missiles to bring down. But the real shock came when they discovered that someone on Earth was helping the Void Swarm defense satellites began shutting down at critical moments and military communications were being jammed. Someone with high-level access was sabotaging the defense effort. Colonel Rodriguez used her military contacts to investigate the sabotage, while Jake and his team continued fighting the scouts in space. Maya worked frantically to trace the source of the interference through computer networks. The traitor revealed himself during the middle of a battle. Dr. Marcus Webb, a government scientist, appeared on their communication channels and announced that he was working with the Void Swarm. He believed that humanity should surrender rather than face total destruction. Dr. Webb had been sending information about Earth defenses to the enemy for months, helping them plan their attack. He thought that cooperation would save at least some humans, but Lyra explained that the Void Swarm never left survivors. The sabotage became more serious when Dr. Webb managed to disable several orbital defense platforms just as the largest enemy scout was approaching Earth. The creature was the size of a city and heading directly for populated areas. Jake realized he would have to use weapons powerful enough to destroy the massive scout, but also dangerous enough to cause damage on Earth. If he missed, the margin for error was almost zero, and millions of lives hung in the balance. Stormclaw shared a vision with Jake, showing him exactly how to target the enemy weak points. The Dragon had fought these creatures before, and knew their vulnerabilities. Jake felt his confidence grow as the ancient knowledge flowed into his mind. The battle reached its climax. As Jake lined up for the critical shot, Colonel Rodriguez ordered all civilian aircraft to land and cleared airspace over the entire continent. The energy weapon Jake was about to use could blind anyone looking directly at it. Jake fired the ancient cannon at maximum power and watched as a beam of pure energy struck the enemy scout. The creature writhed and began breaking apart, but not before sending a final message to the approaching hive ships. The victory was temporary because now the main Void Swarm force knew exactly where Earth defenders were located and how powerful their weapons were. The real invasion would begin soon, and the enemy would be prepared for everything they had seen. Dr. Webb transmission to the Void Swarm had included detailed information about the facility location and Jake's genetic abilities. The enemy now knew about Stormclaw and Lyra and would be planning specific countermeasures as Jake landed his fighter back at the facility. He realized that their secret advantage was gone. The Void Swarm would arrive in overwhelming numbers, and they would know exactly what to expect. The real test was still ahead, and the odds had just gotten much worse. Colonel Rodriguez's military unit began establishing defensive positions around the facility, while Maya worked to repair the sabotaged systems. The next battle would determine whether Earth survived or joined the countless dead worlds consumed by the swarm. In the days following the first battle, Stormclaw began acting strangely. The great dragon would disappear for hours at a time and return looking exhausted. Lyra watched her companion with growing concern, but would not explain what was troubling the ancient creature. Jake noticed that Stormclaw was becoming more powerful during their training sessions. The dragon energy attacks were brighter, and his ability to phase between dimensions was improving. But these new abilities seemed to be draining him physically. Maya discovered unusual energy readings coming from deep within the facility areas that they had not yet explored. Lyra reluctantly agreed to show them the restricted sections, but warned that some knowledge was dangerous to unprepared minds. The restricted areas contained artifacts and weapons that made everything else in the facility look primitive. Ancient symbols covered the walls and strange devices hummed with barely contained power. Jake could feel the energy in the air, making his skin tingle. In the deepest chamber, they found a crystalline structure the size of a building that pulsed with inner light. Lyra called it the Stellar Heart, and explained that it was the most powerful weapon ever created by her people. It could destroy entire solar systems if necessary. Stormclaw approached the crystal and placed his claws against its surface. The structure began glowing brighter, and Jake realized that the dragon was somehow connected to the device. The Stellar Heart was not just a weapon, but part of Stormclaw himself. Lyra finally revealed the truth that she had been hiding. Stormclaw was not just her companion, but the guardian of the Stellar Heart. The weapon was encoded into his genetic structure across multiple dimensions, making him the key to its activation. The Stellar Heart could create controlled supernovas that would cleanse entire systems of Void Swarm infection. But using the weapon required the combined life force of both Dragon Guardian and genetically compatible pilot. The activation would destroy them both. Jake felt sick as he understood what Lyra was telling him. The ultimate weapon against the Void Swarm required his death and Stormclaw death as well. They could save the galaxy, but only by sacrificing themselves in the process. Meanwhile, Amy Foster, a talented young pilot, arrived at the facility with Colonel Rodriguez. Latest reinforcements: Amy had encountered Void Swarm entities during a patrol mission over the Pacific Ocean and barely escaped with her life. Amy proved to have natural abilities with the alien technology that impressed even Lyra. She could interface with the ancient systems almost as well as Jake, despite having no genetic modifications. Her reflexes were exceptional, and her courage was unquestioned as the main Void Swarm force approached Earth. Jake trained with Amy as his backup pilot. Colonel Rodriguez wanted multiple options available in case Jake was killed or injured during the coming battles. The enemy fleet was massive beyond comprehension. Hundreds of hive ships surrounded by thousands of smaller vessels, all moving toward Earth with terrifying purpose. The largest hive ship was positioned behind the moon, using it as a shield. Maya analysis of the enemy formation revealed that the Void Swarm was not just planning to consume Earth. They were fleeing from something even more dangerous, and saw Earth as a potential fortress world for their final stand. Long-range sensors detected another threat approaching from deep space. Something that made the Void Swarm look small by comparison was pursuing them across the galaxy. The enemy of their enemy was something that consumed entire galactic clusters. Jake realized that destroying the Void Swarm with the Stellar Heart might only make room for an even greater threat to arrive. The cosmic balance was more complex than anyone had understood, and every action could have unintended consequences. Lyra began preparing Jake for the mind link required to activate the Stellar Heart. The process would merge his consciousness with Stormclaw across dimensional barriers, creating a new form of existence that could survive the weapon activation. The training was mentally exhausting, and Dangerous Jake experienced visions of cosmic forces beyond human comprehension, and felt his sanity being stretched to its limits. Only his connection with Stormclaw kept him grounded in reality. Amy worked with Colonel Rodriguez to coordinate conventional military forces while Jake prepared for the ultimate mission. Earth armies were taking position around the globe, but their weapons were useless against Void Swarm technology. The enemy began their final approach, and Jake could feel Stormclaw anxiety growing. The dragon knew what the activation of the Stellar Heart would cost them both, but was prepared to make the sacrifice to save countless worlds. In a quiet moment before the battle, Lyra confessed to Jake that she had grown to care for him more than she expected. She had spent so many years in stasis that she had forgotten what it felt like to form emotional connections with others. Jake told Lyra that he understood the necessity of the sacrifice but wished there was another way. She smiled sadly and explained that sometimes the greatest victories required the greatest losses. That was the price of protecting life throughout the galaxy. Stormclaw shared one final vision with Jake, showing him glimpses of the future. That might be possible if they succeeded. Humanity would join a galactic community of survivors, and Earth would become a center of learning and defense against cosmic threats. The hive ships began moving around the moon, and Jake knew that the time for preparation was over. The final battle would determine not just Earth fate, but the fate of everything that lived and breathed in their part of the galaxy. Jake climbed into his fighter craft with Lyra beside him, while Stormclaw prepared to fly alongside them into the heart of the enemy fleet. The Stellar Heart was ready for activation, and Jake's genetic code was synchronized with the dragon consciousness. As they launched from the facility, Jake felt the weight of billions of lives depending on their success. The inheritance from his great-uncle had led to this moment where everything he had learned would be put to the ultimate test. The final battle was about to begin, and Jake knew that win or lose nothing would ever be the same. The ordinary mechanic from Detroit was gone forever, replaced by a guardian ready to sacrifice everything to protect the stars themselves. The massive hive ship loomed ahead of them like a living mountain made of twisted flesh and dark metal. Jake could feel waves of malevolent energy radiating from the alien vessel as they approached. Stormclaw flew beside his fighter craft with scales glowing white-hot from the intense cosmic forces surrounding them. Lyra guided Jake through the ship's outer defenses while monitoring the Stellar Heart energy levels. The weapon was building power, slowly requiring precise timing to avoid premature detonation. Enemy fighters swarmed around them, but Stormclaw destroyed them with bursts of dimensional energy. Inside the hive ship, the corridors were alive with pulsing organic material that tried to grab their craft. Jake had to use all his piloting skills to navigate through passages that shifted and moved like the inside of some vast creature. The deeper they went into the ship, the stronger the Void Swarm influence became. Jake began hearing whispers in his mind promising him power and immortality. If he would join them voluntarily, Lyra helped him resist the mental attacks by sharing her own psychic strength. Amy Foster led a diversionary attack on the ship exterior systems, drawing enemy attention away from Jake mission Colonel Rodriguez. Coordinated strikes from Earth military forces that kept smaller hive ships occupied. While the main assault continued, Maya monitored the mission from the facility command center, tracking their progress through the enemy ship and watching for signs that the Stellar Heart was ready for activation. The weapon required perfect synchronization between Jake consciousness and Stormclaw life force. The hive ship core was a vast chamber filled with swirling energy that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. At the center floated a massive brain-like structure that pulsed with the collective consciousness of the entire void. Swarm Jake realized that destroying this central mind would cripple the entire invasion force, but it would also require him to get close enough for the Stellar Heart to target it effectively. The brain was protected by layers of energy barriers that conventional weapons could not penetrate. Stormclaw began the final phase of the weapon activation process. His body started glowing with inner fire as the Stellar Heart energy flowed through him. Jake felt their consciousness beginning to merge as the dragon shared his life force to power the ancient weapon. The Void Swarm central mind recognized what was happening and launched desperate attacks to stop them. Waves of psychic energy tried to break the connection between Jake and Stormclaw, while physical defenses fired everything they had at the intruders. Lyra made her own sacrifice by using her life energy to shield Jake and Stormclaw from the psychic attacks. Her body began fading as she poured everything she had into protecting them during the crucial final moments, instead of using the stellar heart to destroy everything Jake found. Another solution. He redirected the weapon energy to create a dimensional barrier that would banish the void swarm to the spaces between realities. This would save both species while still eliminating the threat. The dimensional rift opened like a wound in space itself and began pulling the void swarm into exile. The enemy fought against the pull, but their own dark energy made them vulnerable to the banishment. They were being consumed by the very forces they had used to destroy others. Jake felt his consciousness expanding beyond human limits as the weapon activation transformed him. He was becoming something new that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. His connection with Stormclaw became permanent, creating a hybrid. Being Lyra's final act was to stabilize the dimensional barrier with her remaining life force, ensuring that it would hold for eternity. Her sacrifice allowed Jake and Stormclaw to survive the transformation while she became part of the cosmic defense network. The hive ship began collapsing as the void swarm was pulled into dimensional exile. Jake and Stormclaw escaped, just as the massive vessel imploded, taking the enemy's central mind with it. The invasion force scattered without their guiding intelligence back on Earth. The remaining void swarm forces stopped attacking and began retreating into deep space. Without their hive ships to coordinate them, they became nothing more than scattered predators that could be hunted down individually. 6 months later, Jake stood on a mountain overlooking the facility that had become his permanent home. He could shift between human form and dragon form at will, sharing consciousness with Stormclaw while maintaining his individual identity. Maya had taken charge of the scientific program studying alien technology and preparing Earth for membership in the galactic community. Her research was revolutionizing human understanding of physics and biology. Colonel Rodriguez led the new international defense force that combined human military expertise with alien technology. Earth was becoming a fortress world that could protect other civilizations from cosmic threats. Amy Foster had become the leader of a new generation of pilots trained to work with advanced alien technology. She was preparing for the day when Earth would send exploration missions to other star systems. The facility had expanded into a massive complex that served as both research center and training ground for humanity. New role as Galactic Guardians. Scientists and soldiers from around the world came to learn about the wider universe. Jake could sense other survivors scattered across the galaxy, civilizations that had fought similar battles against cosmic threats. Earth had joined a community of worlds dedicated to protecting life throughout the universe. The transformation had given Jake abilities he was still learning to use. He could travel instantly across vast distances and communicate with other guardian beings throughout the galaxy. The loneliness of his sacrifice was balanced by connection to something greater. Stormclaw consciousness remained distinct within their shared existence. The dragon wisdom and ancient memories helped Jake understand his new responsibilities as a cosmic guardian. Their partnership had evolved into something unprecedented. On clear nights, Jake could see Aurora dancing across the sky in patterns that spelled out messages from Lyra. Her consciousness had become part of the barrier protecting reality from dimensional threats. She was not truly gone, but transformed into something eternal. The strange energy signatures that Maya had detected months ago were revealed to be distress signals from other worlds. Facing similar threats, Earth was being contacted by civilizations that needed help against cosmic dangers. Jake realized that his inheritance had been more than just technology and wealth. He had inherited a destiny that connected him to the ancient struggle between creation and destruction. His great-uncle had known this day would come. The facility computers contained star maps showing the locations of other Guardian outposts throughout the galaxy. Earth was becoming part of an ancient network of worlds dedicated to preserving life against entropy and chaos. Amy often asked Jake if he regretted accepting the inheritance and becoming something beyond human. He always told her that the sacrifice had been worth it to save everyone he cared about and countless beings he would never meet. The threat that had been chasing the void swarm never materialized, suggesting that the dimensional barrier had protected reality from something even worse than the invasion Earth had faced. The cosmic balance was more fragile than anyone understood. Jake's training of new guardians continued as more humans showed signs of genetic compatibility with the alien technology. Maya theorized that the modifications in his bloodline were spreading naturally, creating a new branch of human evolution. The facility had become a pilgrimage site for people seeking to understand humanity's place in the wider universe. Jake welcomed visitors and shared what wisdom he could while protecting the more dangerous secrets as Jake watched the stars appear in the evening sky. He felt a deep sense of purpose and connection. The ordinary life he had lost in Detroit seemed like a distant dream compared to the cosmic responsibilities he now carried. The inheritance had transformed not just Jake but all of humanity. Earth was no longer an isolated world but a guardian of life throughout the galaxy. The price of that transformation had been high, but the rewards were beyond measure.